Ugh. Hello and welcome. Cucumbered pickle. Welcome. Today we are going to be poking around at editor scripting for VR chat stuff. I guess since we're starting out, hi, I am Valgan. I do tutorial videos for VR chat content, primarily on the world building and programming side. And I really like automating things with cool tools and extra features. Hi, Box of Biscuit. We'll be poking out some editor scripts today. They are a thing that I realistically probably do more of than I need to, but my god, do I like a nice workflow. Yo, hey Carrot, how's it going? Alright. Now, one of the problems with making editor scripts is that they almost always exist to solve some kind of problem. So for a tutorial or the likes, I need to find a problem. And I'm not entirely sure what that should be yet. One idea that I have is, let's say you have a button that wants to send an event to another script. You need two things. One, you need a way to know what the target script is. And hello, huge fan of it. Let's go. So I think the thing that we'll make is just a button that can send any event to another script. So we'll need a target, behavior, and a string. But I want us to have any amount of these targets that we can send, so we can call a bunch of events at once in order, or in order at the same time. That's diametrically opposed, so ignore that. So we'll need one, the actual script that's going to call these events, two, a target that's going to be receiving all of these events, and three, our actual editor script that's going to be doing everything. And I'll be showing a few different ways to do that, because there's some really nice ways to do it, and there's some really complicated ways to do it that result in a very nice user experience. So it's all a balance of, are you spending more time developing this than you are saving, or are you saving more time by developing this? And that balance is a very difficult one to guess. So let's just get started ahead and get our stuff set up. We're just going to have a button here in the middle of our scene that is going to do the actual clicking. So we can walk up to this button, click it, and stuff happens. My behavior is probably as horrendously generic of a name as you could possibly come up with. So I'll fix it. Why take an hour to do what you can automate in 10 minutes? You know, you're so right. Look, if it takes an hour and you have to do it more than, what's 24 times? 240 times, then you're saving time. That's how math works, right? Yeah, okay. Definitely. Alright, so we'll just have this script called event sender. And now, we don't have things like custom classes or data storage types that are easy and friendly in Udon. We get some nice things out of data lists, but data lists aren't really conducive to having a nice inspector experience. So like when you're actually clicked into Unity and you're looking at this, data lists don't really help us there. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be faking some data structures using inspector tooling and turning that into array values. So we're just kind of piling everything into one section and then reinterpreting that data later. It just needs to be stored in a way that Udon is friendly with. So let's go ahead and get the two things that we need for that. We'll do a public Udon behavior array for our targets. And then we'll do a public string array for our event names. Now, if you want to click this button and call each of these events, you can use this data structure. Like, this works perfectly fine. You just have to go into your inspector here and let's see. You put in the first target here, and then you do interact with likes here. And this works. It's just clunky and hard to use. Excuse me. Which is exactly the thing that we want to solve with editor scripting. Believe me, there are much more intense things that you can solve with editor scripting, but I think this is a pretty basic starting point to really kind of dive into this. My workflow almost exclusively uses ridiculous editor tooling and just having a very static environment in Unity, well, in VRChat. So let's go ahead and actually spike this up a bit. Actually, well, let's first have our just a receiver so we know that it works. So let's have our object toggler, and we'll just have a public void underscore because we don't want it networked. Toggle object. And we'll just do GameObject.setActive to the not of GameObject active self. And that is all we need for our target object here. So let's go ahead and get this set up in Unity. Now let's just throw in some spheres. That'll be good enough. Sphere, object toggler, and we'll have 3 of them. Now, our cube here needs to talk to all 3 of these things. So if we wanted to do that, we could do object toggle, object toggle, object toggle, then sphere, sphere, and sphere. But there's nothing that a user can imply this element correlates with this element. That's just not a great experience. So let's go ahead and line those up. What we're going to need is a custom editor for this. And since it's editor scripting, we'll have to make a editor folder, because that is where Unity puts all of the scripts and namespaces that actually do things for the editor in. That way they stay out of the actual compiled build. So we're going to do event sender editor. Oops, if I could spell it all. And I'm going to dock this right next to this because we're going to be using both of these functions, well, both of these scripts pretty interchangeably here as we're setting this up. So instead of mono behavior or Udon sharp behavior, we're going to be using a editor, which is from the Unity editor namespace. And we're going to give it the attribute custom editor, Unity editor, custom editor type of, and then this will be the type of event set. There we go. I want to use arrays that relate to each other like that, but always ends up confusing. Yeah. So this is a very easy way to get into this kind of tooling, because not only is it relatively quick to set up, but it just happens to be a very useful tool. We can also set it up in some very different ways. I'm going to start with probably the oldest implementation of this, which is going to be using Unity's like GUI layout and that, and then I'll be moving into using the new, is it UI Elements, UI Toolkit? They have a lot of names for it, but the new UI tooling, which I find to be much better, but it's a very different system. So if we want to actually have references to these two things, we get to those through what are called serialized properties. Since these are both public, we can actually reference these values as a Unity thing over in our editor. So we're going to do a private serialized property, and my naming convention for that is just always underscore prop targets. Control D to duplicate, and then prop event names. Now, like modern behaviors, editor gives us a on enable, and we're going to be grabbing these two from the base script here. But how do we reference this script? What this script is, according to this inspector here, is a serialized object. UI toolkit is script. Yeah, they've changed the name a couple times. I think UI Elements might be the old one now. Yeah, UI Elements is the old one. UI Toolkit is the new one, and UI Builder is their custom editor tooling for it. Yeah, okay. So in onEnable, we're going to be grabbing these from our serialized object. So serialized object is just a variable that exists in the editor class and is representative of this script here because of our custom editor up here. So we'll do prop targets equals serialized object dot find property, and we just have to assert that it's there. So we're going to do name of, and then pass event sender dot targets. That way, if we ever rename this in any way, like if I just targets again, you see it renames it over here, and then we don't have to worry about that. All right, I'll duplicate that line, copy event names, select both of these, and swap this out. So now we have references to these. So we're going to go into the function that most of Unity's IMGUI relies on, which is on inspector GUI. There we go. Now, if we just leave base on inspector GUI, this just renders the generic way that Unity will render an inspector. And you're going to notice it is not the same as how the script looks already. So if I click on this, you'll see we just have the script, we have our targets up here, and we have our event names down here. We do not have the Udon Sharp editor at the top, because that is part of the Udon Sharp custom inspectors that come with it. If we want to have those back, we can actually put a section here at the top, which is Udon Sharp editor, editor utility. Okay, I don't remember this one by name, so this might take a few tries. Udon Sharp GUI.draw default Udon Sharp behavior header. Okay, it has a really long name. And then we just pass target. Now, target, unlike serialized object is a collection of these properties that are serialized the way Unity handles this. Target is I believe it's an object. Yeah, it's just a Unity editor object, which is a reference to event sender. So what we could actually do is, if we wanted to, we could have a event sender variable here, script equals target, and that obviously doesn't work because we need to cast it. But if we just cast it there as event sender, this is a raw reference to this script here. We can run functions, we can do whatever we want. And that's what target is, and that's why the Udon Sharp GUI references it here. But if I delete that, we can pretty much go back and realistically have almost the entire identical inspector that Udon Sharp gives us, just by having that function at the top. Yep. So we have our program source, we have our sync method, we have our utilities dropdown. That's basically all that the Udon Sharp editor adds for that. But, excuse me, we don't actually want to be using the base version since we're going to be overwriting it. The way that we do that is actually, there's a lot of ways that you can go about having these kind of custom inspectors. What we're going to start with, just to show the basic ones, is editor GUI layout. You're going to see a lot of that. You're going to see a lot of GUI layout as well. Dot property field, prop targets. And this right here is identical to how targets normally gets displayed in the editor. So if we swap over here, you'll see we now have targets twice. We have once down here in the area here, and you'll see that since it's a serialized property, it's keeping all of those values that are custom to that editor, such as the dropdown. If I click the dropdown on targets, both of these expand because they're both referencing the same data that Unity has for their editor. Now, obviously, this isn't super useful for us because we want to combine these two things. And I need some water. One sec. Excuse me. All right, so I'm gonna just comment out base on inspector GUI down here. And now we need to find a way to interact with the array displays for these. Because we don't want to display the entire array. We want to display each one in tandem with each other. And that's where things get a little bit wonky. Mostly because serialized properties make arrays a little bit weird, if I'm being honest. So what we can do here is we'll get a... Actually, let's leave the editor GUI property field here. But we're going to do prop targets dot get array element at index. And if we just pass 0, it's just going to get the first target that exists in here. Now, if targets is a 0 length array, then that's going to error out and your whole inspector is going to fall apart. I'm just showing you how this works for now. But if you see here, we have element 0, and it's here. We can actually use this field just by referencing the array element at index. This is useful, but I find that as this gets deeper and deeper, like, oh, we have an array element here, we're getting a find thing of property, and it can be very abstracted from the actual data that you're using. It's a little annoying, and one of the reasons why I like moving away from the IMGUI implementation for Unity and into the UI toolkit that we're using now. But I think it's going to be good to just show off this system first, because I find it to be pretty important just to understand what a lot of tooling in Unity is already using. Most VRChat editor tools use these systems. I want people to use the new ones, but it's a lot of learning. Now, what we can do right now, just for this test, is we can assert that both of these arrays are the same length, and just for now, just for helping us set this up. So we're going to get a int of count here equals to prop targets dot array size. Now we can just for loop that for I and then count. So this will run 3 times. And we're going to want to render this once for each of the 2 fields that we have. So I'll just duplicate that, and instead of prop targets, we'll do prop event field. And instead of 0, we'll put in I for this. Now, this should give us a cascading ladder of the 2 different arrays. And if you see here... Oh, actually, yeah, I'm seeing that this is kind of hidden behind my avatar on stream. Why didn't everyone tell me? Alright, hold on. Let me move some stuff around here so this is a bit more visible. There we go. All right. So if you see here, we actually have a little bit of a cascading thing where it's element 0, element 0, element 1, element 1, element 2, element 2. And wasn't that in the way? Okay, okay. Yeah, that's fair. Here, I'll just put a inspector over here, lock it. Oh, can you not lock an empty inspector? I didn't realize that. Well, I will lock it on something that doesn't matter, and then go back to the queue. Alright. So this helps. It puts the data that we need right next to each other, but A, we can't expand it. B, they're not side by side, which is our kind of end goal here. And C, is going to completely break the moment that these values, these array sizes aren't the same length. So we're going to have to set up some changes here. First of all, let's make these horizontal. Let's make it actually layer out the way that we want to. And we're going to do that with, there's a couple ways. Editor, GUI, begin, your layout horizontal scope. It's been a while. Okay, so we're gonna do using new editor GUI layout horizontal scope. So this is the way, one of the ways where you can make things render horizontally. And since we're doing this in our for loop, it'll render this, and then it will go on to the next line and render them both. I personally like doing this. There's like an editor GUI.begin horizontal or stuff like that. The main issue that I have with that in particular is you don't have a great indented way of seeing the difference. So if we do it here, this using here shows you within your code an indent, and I just prefer using it that way because of that. However, you're seeing now that these fields are very squished because of these labels, and we don't really want these labels here taking up all this space. So instead of doing property fields, actually, can we set a specific label in this? GUI content.none. Yeah, I think this will let us kind of hide the excuse me. It'll let us hide the actual field, like the labels. There we go. Yeah. So now we have the reference and the name right next to each other. Now, there's a bunch of things we can do to pretty this up. So, for example, we can pass an editor style in here that I think is help box. Oh god, this one's hold on. Editor styles dot help box. There we go. And help box is the kind of pop up with a little window, but it's also the one that you have almost certainly seen the most. So you'll see each one of these rows now has a little circle around it. That's not really what we're going for here, so I'll actually swap that out to being a vertical scope. That's it. So using, oops, if I could type it all. Using new editor GUI layout dot vertical scope, I will toss this style into this, and then we'll put the rest of our script up in here. Now, we should have this all in one kind of collective box. Yeah, there we go. So there's a separate box here, and there's a lot of little functions that we can do to kind of help out with this. Like, let's do GUI layout.space and just say 20. If we do this here before our box, but after the sharp behavior header, this will give us a lot more space to kind of see that this is a separate thing from up here. So once this completely loads and everything, there we go. We have a big old gap right up here, which we can work with. Now, not super useful at the moment, so I'll just get rid of that, but something is good to know. Need some more water here. That's good. Now, let's actually figure out how to add and remove from this array, because right now, well, we can't. It's just locked to 3. So we're going to add in some buttons down here, which is nice and easy. So if GUI layout dot button, and just put something here like add, then we run code here. Now, if you see here, it will show up and it will take up the entirety of the horizontal space. And we're not going to want that. We're going to want this to be much smaller and on the bottom right. Now, the way that we do that is similarly, we grab a horizontal scope, and what we do instead is, instead of a GUI layout space that I showed up here, we can do a GUI layout dot flexible space. And a flexible space just takes up as much space as it possibly can without compressing the previous thing. It can shrink it down, but will never squish it. So you see here, this button is the same size as the word add that's inside of it. And it's just part of this whole system up here. So we can actually duplicate this here, and I'll swap this for a minus and give us a plus sign on this one. So then you'll see we'll actually have a subtract and add function right up here. Yep, just these two little buttons. Now we need to actually make these do something. Excuse me. Now, since we have two different arrays that we're working with, we need to actually work with both of those arrays. So we'll have to do prop targets dot array. Actually, how do we insert array element at index? Oh, is that how we do it? Or can we write to the array size? This might work. It also might not work, but I want to try this quick. Because again, while this tooling is used by a lot of people right now, I'm a little bit not as fresh with it. Wow, that sounded like a really cringe sentence, actually. Yeah, okay. So that's a read-only value. These buttons don't actually do anything if I do that. This is one of the things that makes arrays kind of they're kind of weird when it comes to the serialized properties specifically. So let's do insert array element at index, and then oh, will it let us do -1? Is that a thing that we can do? Because if so, that will let us just append something to the end. It might break, I don't actually know. Or it might put something at the start. But let's find out. That in fact did break. Okay, so we can't do -1, but what we can do is prop targets dot array size. Now, let's find out if I need to put a -1 on that. Bonk. Yep, outside of range, so array size -1. And this should let us well, it's not doing anything, so let's see. Serialized properties, serialized properties and serialized objects let you change a lot of values before you actually do the applying section of it. So it may just be that we need to declare we are done, apply the current settings. which would just be serialized object dot apply, if I can spell, apply modified properties. Let's go ahead and see if that works. There we go. Now we need to actually do the same thing but removing. So we're gonna do, yeah. All right, remove array, delete array element at index. Okay. So we're going to do, yeah, I think it should be fine to do the same value. Now, there's a really nice tool in Unity called reorderable lists, which I'll show in a bit. They're a lot easier to work with using UI Toolkit, which I'll show you a bit later. But let's see, we can add and we can remove. Awesome. Now, this system will completely break if for some reason some of your values got messed up. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to get the smallest size of these two. So mathf.min and then prop target array size, prop event names array size. And this basically lets us ignore anything beyond this. So let's say for some reason our tooling broke and we got one more event name than we did of a target. This will concat it down into one value. That's the safest one that is equal between the two. Let's see. What else do we want to do? Oh, we can add in some buttons and stuff. So let's say we want to remove this value. How does it determine where the elements of the UI go? Like, how does it know the buttons should be below the arrays? Sure. So what we're doing here is the entire thing is in one vertical scope. Unity does this by default in the inspector, but this vertical scope has us lets us do this little editor like style here. Now, what we're doing here is we're doing horizontal scopes. And horizontal scopes tell it to layer everything that's inside of this section horizontally, so one after another in a row. And since we're escaping this horizontal scope, anything that comes after this will be appended underneath it in the inspector. Which is why we're starting another horizontal scope down here that we're putting the plus and minus in. So we have essentially a box that's here covering this area with these 6 elements here, and then another box that's right below it that contains all these little buttons on the bottom right and the giant flexible space that pushes them over here. There's some more water. Now, let's say you want to remove element 2, or like this one right here. Well, we can't do that using these buttons down here. So let's add a button into our horizontal scope that does the same thing. We'll just do a copy our button here, but instead of minus, I'm going to put, oh, hold on. We have technology. All right, let's see what ASCII likes for an X. There we go. That's the one I was after, not the big purple one. We also don't want prop targets array size I. We want just to put I in here. And since we're doing more things down here, after we apply these settings, we want to update the serialized object to represent the new settings. So we'll just do serialized object dot update. So now, you see we have some tiny little boxes over here with our plus, our delete signs. Now, these are really small because buttons by default don't automatically expand outwards. What do expand outwards are our fields here. So if we hit X on this one, oh, suddenly removed it. Now, there may have been an error that appeared up here, and that's because when we're removing this element here, what we aren't doing is telling our for loop here to figure it out. Because when we remove this element, suddenly our count is no longer correct. But since we're doing this for this frame, we can basically just do break. And that ends our for loop for this frame, and we can resume rendering our stuff correctly on the next frame. So I go ahead and just wait for this to compile. Come on, Unity, you can do it. There we go. And clear the console down there, and I hit plus, plus, and then just delete this one. No errors, and it's working perfectly fine. Now, let's make sure this works perfectly fine on a fresh script, because that's where the problems end up. So, I'll remove that, put it on, and you see, all right, we have an empty box here with our pluses over here, and that gives us an error. That is because prop target's array size isn't real. Like, there isn't an array there. So what we have is an array size of 0 minus 1. And we're trying to insert an array element at the index of -1, having the same issue we ran into earlier. Now, what we basically have to do for that is add in custom handling for that. And we're going to have to do this for subtracting as well, because let's just fake our values here by going into debug mode. So if I swap this to debug, event names, just bump these both up to 1. So if you see, I can hit minus, and then it breaks, and then I hit minus again, and we get more breaking. Because there's nothing at the end. There's nothing for it to delete. So this is running into the same issue, removing no elements, as this is running into trying to create while there are no elements. So what we want to do is get our size up here. So we actually have a count value that we're already using. We're going to do if count equals 0, else, and we're going to put these two in, actually, no, we will have int insert index, and this will be the value where we are putting this. So if count does not equal 0, we will use the one that we're already using, which is prop array size -1. So insert index equals that, and otherwise we'll just have this equal to 0, and we won't do anything in this section. So we can actually simplify this to it's not equal 0. We can do this section, and then if we just want to be really kind of concise with all of our space, we can get rid of these brackets and just have the insert to the next line do that. For now, I'll just have the brackets on here just for a bit more legibility. Now, we can go ahead and swap these out. And it looks like we'll basically have to do the same thing down here. So I'm going to break this out to right before we do our spacing there. And swap this here as well. That way both of these can use the same calculated logic for which index to go at. Though I guess at this point, we're not inserting in the removal section. So I'll rename this to element index. Good enough for now. All right, let's make sure all the things that I just talked about actually work. That's going to be a real decider. All right, we don't have any immediate errors in the inspector, which is nice. I hit plus, we can actually insert things. I hit minus, it removes things. And we still get this value, this error, when we're hitting minus. Retrieving array element that was out of bounds. So, okay. So we're gonna want to do a different check because we're still trying to delete here. So we're going to just. Oh, there's a few ways that we can do this. All right. So, like we did up here with the using editor GUI layout horizontal scope, there's another feature. There's another feature that is a disabled scope. And you know in Unity when there's like a button that's grayed out and you can't change it, like the drop down on this shader for the default material, that is what the editor considers to be a disabled element. You can still see it, but you can't interact with the drop down. And we're going to enable that if element or index equals 0. And that means you can't press the minus button if there's nothing to remove. So let's go ahead and do using new editor GUI layout dot. Is it just GUI layout? Oh no, it's editor GUI dot disabled scope. There we go. And in here we give it the bool as to whether or not to disable. So we'll do element index equals 0. So now, if we put our button in here, this minus button will be disabled if there's nothing in the arrays to remove. At least that's the hope. Let's find out. This is probably going to be very subtle on the stream, but yeah, there we go. This tiny button right here is kind of grayed out. So we've got a little thinner outline. Everything's a bit grayer. And you see that it just isn't quite the same as the button that's right next to it. And if I try to click it, oh, okay, so it doesn't let me remove the last element either, and that's my fault. That's because our element index here is our removal index. So let's just go ahead and instead of that, let's do. Okay, let's reformat this a bit. We'll just do. We'll grab count. Okay, so if count equals 0, then we do this. Okay. All right. That's what we needed to do. We needed to put our array length, like the count here, instead of the index that we're trying to insert at. It's grayed out right now. It's not grayed out. And it's grayed out when there's nothing here. Awesome. Well, I guess we can just set this up quick to... Ooh, okay. So when I try to put in the references here, it is clearing out. Let's find out why that is. So the way this is working is this whole GUI that we're using here, everything is being rendered brand new every new frame of the editor. So every time the editor redraws, oh hi Lemillet, how's it going? We're just going through some editor tooling here, and I am showing off some, frankly, some issues that we're running into. Now, as a result of it rendering every frame, everything here gets redrawn every frame. So if these values get updated, well, we lose those changes. So what we can do is, similarly, we had the serialized object apply modified properties and the serialized object update right here. We can do a change scope. So similar to how we have a disabled scope down here, we can do a change scope. So check to see if something has changed. So using new editor GUI is it editor GUI yeah, editor GUI change scope. And we're actually going to save this because we need a reference to this value. So var changed equals, and I don't like using var, so let's use the explicit type for that. Energy UI change check scope. Is that right? Is it change check scope? I thought it was just change scope. I guess it is. All right. So we're gonna put both of these into this section here. And since we now have values to whether or not something's changed, we can do something when it is changed. So after everything that we need is rendered, we can do if changed dot changed. Okay, maybe I would have named that incorrectly. I'm building a real-time reflection system by attaching a real-time probe to a player head and limiting its frame rate. Is there a way to grab the running FPS and set it to a fraction of that? Huh. That's an interesting one. I don't believe there's a way to grab the raw FPS that Unity is using, but what you can do is you can just do some math using like time.delta time, because time.delta time is how long a frame has been. If I sat down and like experimented with it, you could pretty quickly extrapolate. All right, if this frame took this long, how much of this could you fit into a second? So I guess you just do 1 divided by that number, and that'll get you your FPS. It'll change constantly. It'll be a very rapidly changing number. You may in fact want some smoothing to go along with it. But that's probably how you would want to go ahead and do that, if I can think right. Yeah. All right. So when this is changed, this is just a value that is triggered whenever either of these fields have had their stuff wiggled around. So we'll just copy the thing here for the serialized object, apply and update. And if we go back into Unity, excuse me, this should actually work. So if I drag this in here, hooray, the value actually stayed. All right, now the real test. If I click away from it and click back, all right, it's also here. What function are we calling again? Object, underscore toggle object. So I'll just put that on all 3 of these. Bonk, bonk, bonk. Now, let's actually have this, yeah, that is set up. Okay, so we need our event sender to actually send the thing for testing. So we'll do the interact function. And for targets.length, actually no, we'll do the same safe count check up here. So instead of these being our serialized properties, we can just raw reference the stuff there. And instead of array size, we can just do length. Put our count here. And for each of these, we're going to do... well, let's first check to see if the thing's actually real. So if utilities.is valid targets I, which is our current index, we do targets I dot send custom event, and just use event names I. And this is basically how you pretend to have your custom data types, because it's just 2 arrays and you just use them at the same time. Now, if we go back into Unity and click this button, these balls should be able to toggle off and on. Now, my editor stuff is a little bit... there we go. So you need to do this. Makes me realize I need to stop doing Udon scripting in Notepad++. I use JetBrains Rider. JetBrains Rider is awesome and free for non-commercial use. Please try it out. It is a wonderful tool, and it has a lot of great keybinds that you can use if you are coming from specific applications to help you be used to, like, help you adapt into the ecosystem for it quite quickly. But it's so nice to have a proper full-fat IDE. I find Visual Studio Code is pretty good as well. It's the one that I use for my actual tutorial videos because I can just assert that everyone has Visual Studio Code because everyone can get it pretty easily, and it is a very lightweight application. Yeah, Visual Studio is pretty good. Honestly, the main reason I don't use Visual Studio itself instead of Visual Studio Code is, like, it just keeps forgetting my Microsoft login, so I just keep getting really annoyed at it and giving up. Alright, so if we go ahead here and go into play mode, I should be able to walk up to these spheres, click this button, and they should toggle off and on. Awesome, so that is working. All these values are being set correctly. Now, there's some things that you can do beyond what we're going to go over today, where you can turn this into a drop-down of all of the public events. That is hard, but for example, it's what happens here. The client sim udon helper basically does that and gets that same list here. And you can turn that into a drop-down that you select from. That's just Microsoft in general. Copilot constantly bugs out on me. Yeah, I understand that, like, programming AI tools are very effective and quite useful. I have just found that they have failed me so many times that I'm just very soured on them, and if I'm going to be using them, it'll be in 5 years, when they've had time to mature and become actually good. Because right now, they're not. Or at least the ones that I've interacted with. Now, yeah, our custom inspector for this is working perfectly. Now, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but let's improve it a bit. So what I've shown you so far is the IMGUI approach, the editor GUI or GUI layout approach. And it's quite good. Like, realistically, this isn't a lot of code, and if I wasn't doing a tutorial for this, it wouldn't have taken me 50 minutes to set up. If you know how to do this, you can have what I just made done in 5-10 minutes. Now, UI elements, or UI toolkit, might take a little bit longer, but oh my god, is the approach so much more worth it. So let's go ahead and make a new script that we're going to use for this. We're going to be bouncing between a few different things for this, because we can do all of the UI elements, or like UI toolkit stuff, just in code, but we can also do it in a tool called the UI Builder, which is a tool that Unity has for just making a UI. If we want to use this for editor tools, we just go to the library button here, select tree view because it's just objectively better, and then select editor extension authoring. It gives you a big pop-up of you can now use editor only controls. Now, this still doesn't look like, well, the inspector, because that's just not how the UI for an inspector looks. The way we fix that is up on the top right, we have built-in default runtime theme. Change that to active editor theme, and congrats, it's now the inspector. This also lets you check out how it looks in light mode to see if something that you made looks god-awful in the other color scheme. Have a good drive-by meeting at your desk. Amazing. Hydrate here. All right. So, excuse me. One of the main advantages of UI Toolkit over IMGUI is, as I said before, this gets rendered every frame of the editor. Like, this all gets rebuilt every single time, which means, let's say we have, I don't know, let's go and manually set this to 300, and 300. If we go back to our normal inspector, it's probably not coming across on stream very well, but this is noticeably tanking my performance. Yeah. Yeah, it's not ideal. Let's just set this back to 3 and 3. Go back to normal. There we go. So what UI Toolkit really brings to the table is we can build things in a way that is very similar to web development, actually. So you have USS, which is the Unity version of CSS. A lot of stuff is just kind of like HTML, but it's UXML. Because it's more like XML. But basically, if you are familiar with making websites, it is a instant transition to being able to make these tools. They are basically identical. Now, if you're not familiar with making websites, that's fine. They're very learnable. So what we're going to do is I'm not going to delete or edit the event sender editor. I'm actually just going to make a second one so we can keep that one around. I plan on having all of these example assets available on my Patreon for anyone who wants to go through it. Obviously, there's the entire tutorial video, but if you want to play around and edit the exact examples that I have, then I will have those available either sometime tonight or tomorrow. I don't know what my schedule is looking like once stream ends here. So I'm just going to make a new C# script here and do event sender elements editor. Now, if I want to actually do this, a lot of the setup is very simple. Looks like the right-click drop-down that you just showed. Yeah, I have noticed that, which is why I've been verbalizing my exact actions when I'm in those drop-downs. I couldn't find a way to capture just Unity and also capture those pop-ups. If there's a way to do that through OBS, please let me know. I know how to fix that on Discord screen sharing, but I haven't figured that out for OBS yet. Now, you'll notice a lot of our setup is going to be very similar. We swap this over to an editor script. We import the Unity editor stuff. We slap on the custom editor type of here. I'm actually going to comment this out just so this isn't fighting our other script. And similarly, we're going to grab our serialized properties, and on enable, we're going to populate them. But instead of on inspector GUI, we're going to be doing things a little bit different. We're going to be using create inspector GUI. Now, create inspector GUI works kind of like on inspector GUI, just at once, and it uses something called a visual element. The visual element is Unity's generic thing that can be rendered in an editor. So like in a lot of modern Unity versions, a lot of like this here, this whole IamGUI render and everything is actually inside of a visual element that's called an IamGUI container. So at the end of the day, it turns into a visual element. If I just leave return base.createInspectorGUI, you're going to see that it does a very similar thing to just the what was it called? On inspector GUI. It's going to do a almost identical thing. So I swap over to here. Yep, we have our drop downs. We have everything lined up like this. We have our script stuff at the top. Now, to show off exactly where IamGUI is working for this, or like the UI elements and stuff in general, is we can actually right-click this tab, and right at the bottom, you have UI Toolkit Debugger. You can pin this somewhere, and this will give you a pick element option. So if you see, if I just do that, the whole thing is just one IamGUI container. And this is your big like tree debug for all of your stuff. It's going to look a little bit complicated for now. And honestly, for now, you can probably ignore most of the stuff on the right. But this is the whole tree of all of the things that are happening in the inspector here. So this IAM-GUI container here is this thing right here. Now, you might be thinking, oh, we're using a visual element. We're using the create inspector GUI. Why is it giving us an IAM-GUI container? And that's because by default, in Unity 2022, this is an IAM-GUI container. But we don't actually want that. We want to build this the UI elements way. So we're going to start by just creating a visual element. I'll just call this root. So it's going to be our root object equals new visual element. And we're going to return root instead. Now, this is just going to be empty. There's going to be nothing in this box whatsoever. Maybe a 2-pixel gap, but that's going to be it. Yep. Yeah, so there's just a few pixels of a space there because this root is just empty. There's nothing here. But what we can do is, excuse me. What we can do is we can do the inspector element. There we go. Inspector element dot fill default inspector. So we pass this the container that's going to fill, which is a root. We pass the serialized object, which our editor is using. So serialized object. And then we pass the editor that this is going to be displayed in, which is just this. So we just type the word this. Now, if we head back into Unity, this all compiles, you'll see that we get essentially the same thing. We get the script at the top, we get our targets here, we get our events dropdowns, but you'll notice that the styling is just a little bit different. The sizing, the light up is just a little bit different. And if we do the pick element here, you'll see it isn't one massive box. Everything here is a visual element part because it's using the brand new Unity visual element system. So if I click on this, well, this isn't sized very well, but you'll see this label is its own thing, part of this object field, part of this property field. And all of these are individual objects that we can now edit. Now, one of the downsides to doing this kind of stuff is there's a lot of just kind of knowing what something's called. So, for example, if we have a... Oh, what's an editor field that is UI elements these days? I don't think it would be any of these. Hold on. I made some of these. VRC spatial audio source. There we go. So this, I think... Yeah, okay. So the VRC spatial audio source component is using UI elements. Now, what we can actually do here is we can, this label, go up to the float field, property field, and then you'll see this one here. This inspector element is the base container for all of this stuff. And it has a padding of 15, 2, 6, and 2. This whole green section here, that's kind of behind my head, sorry. But that's what kind of gives it the formatting of the Unity inspector. So if we want to grab that, that's a style that is one of these three. And because it's one of those three, I don't know which it is. So I'm just going to copy all of them. And this is all something you just have to know this word. This is one of the kind of annoying parts. So we're going to do root.add to class list. And these are the kind of style classes that it's using. So I'm going to do Unity Inspector Element. Unity Inspector Element. And if we head back in, I don't think this will make the change. I think this has to be the UIE. Would it be on the Unity docs anywhere? I believe so. Let me open up a... Honestly, let me open up a DM I have with someone, because I'm sure they sent... There we go. All right, so Unity actually has something called the Unity Editor Foundations, which is a website entirely dedicated to the styles and aesthetic of the Unity editor and telling people what those things are. I just put this in chat. This is the website that has all of the info on these kind of colors and things, but since it's, well, a string, Rider or your IDE doesn't know what this is, so it can't get that right off of a guess. So we're going to grab the other one here as well, which, if I remember right, is element container. No, inspector container. There we go. And this is the same thing, Unity inspector element -- UIE. So I'll duplicate this -- UIE. If we head back in, this should compress things down a bit. It should format things inward a bit. And there we go. You see some of the gaps are a bit smaller. Everything's pushed away from the side a bit. And this is generally what it normally looks like to have these fields. There's a few little aesthetic differences between this and the drop-downs we had before. But that all gets ironed out by the time of Unity 6. So if you're using the new version of Unity on a standalone projects, this will be all identical. In fact, I'm GUI containers being the default for everything is basically gone for Unity 6. It's all UI elements now. All of these tools still exist. It's just not inherently the default tool. So now that we have that, and we have the fill default inspector, well, we're exactly where we started. We have our drop downs, and they're not really doing anything for us. So let's go ahead and basically do what we did in our script here, but in a much better way. So instead of fill default inspector, I'm going to comment this out, move this all the way down to the bottom. We're going to use something called a reorderable list. Reorderable lists were in fact a part of IMGUI. They're just so much harder to use in these ones. There's so many things you have to set up. There's so many things you have to get right. And I found that it just wasn't worth the effort. But now they're really nice. So let's do a reorderable list from, okay, in Unity 2022, they are in, oh no, it's not a reorderable list. Reorderable list was the IMGUI name for it. The UI elements name for it, apparently that is the correct one, according to this import, is the list view. All right, that's it. And list views can do two things. One, you can either pump it full of whatever random data you want, or two, it can bind completely to a serialized property and inherit things directly off of that. So if I do list view target list equals new list view, what I could do is just do prop targets. And if we go back into our inspector here, apparently we get an error because I did something. Oh no, you can't pass it in like that. What you have to do is target list dot bind property and then prop targets. Now, target list on its own isn't actually put anywhere. We have our root object, but we're never telling this to be inside of this root. So quite easily with that, we just do root.add target list. And now this target list is a child of this root object and gets displayed in our editor. So if we head back here, we should be able to just have this be normal again. But it's just going to be one field. So you'll see we have our size, we have our 3 different fields, but you'll notice that everything's a little bit off. Our size is really big. This is pushing off the right side of the screen. We can't reorder it, and we don't have the plus or minus. That's because all of those, excuse me, are settings for the list view. So what we can do is we can actually initialize a bunch of members for this. We're not going to need most of these. So let's do, let's get rid of all these. Visible, yep. Binding item source. All right, let's do selection type. We, yeah, let's have it be single. You can only select one object at a time. We don't need selection index. Show border, we're going to have be true. Reorderable will also be true. We don't want horizontal scaling, so that's false by default. We'll do that. Show alternating row backgrounds. I really like having this set to all. So every other line in the list view is going to be slightly darker. Virtualization method fixed height, don't care about that. Fixed item height, don't care. Show bound collection size. That is the number on the top right that shows you how many things are there. So we're going to have that be true. Show fold-out header, we're going to have that be true. Header title, I'll just do like my list for now. Show add remove footer, we'll have that be true. Reorder mode, we'll have this be animated, which is basically what you expect it to look like. And we don't need to do anything with the make, bind, unbind, or destroy yet. We'll fiddle with those in a bit. But for now, we'll just have these options be what our list can do. And you may think, that's a lot of options. That's a lot of things that we just set up to have it be the same visually as what it used to be. And, well, yeah, it is. But that's because it can do so many different things in so many different situations. And if you look now, this is exactly how it used to be. We have our reorderable slidable drop downs. We have our plus and minus down here. We have the size up here, and we have the name, well, my list right here as well. Now, what you're noticing, well, what you might notice is that what we don't have is our grayed out script name up here, and we don't have our Udon Sharp behavior reference. Now, Udon Sharp doesn't have a UI element version of its header, so we're actually going to add an IamGUI container that just holds that. So we'll do a IamGUI container, Udon Sharp container equals new IamGUI container. And IamGUI containers basically have a callback function that when this is running, do this thing. So Udon Sharp container dot on GUI handler, which is an action. I think we just do, yeah. What is the formatting for this? There we go. That's it. So basically in here, all of the code that is here, it will render whenever I'm on GUI is called for this Udon Sharp container. So what we'll just do here, Udon Sharp GUI.draw default target semicolon. And then we just add this to root.add Udon Sharp container. And since we're adding that before our target list down here, it should appear at the top. There we go. So yeah, we have our program source, we have our synchronization method, we have our interact text, we have our proximity, we have our dropdown for utilities, and this basically just looks exactly how it would be if we were to have this array on our normal Udon behavior. And now that we have fully recreated the thing that we started with, let's actually start making this interesting. All right, so there's a few things that we can do for this. I haven't actually fully decided. Is the Udon part rendered each frame like the old method? Unfortunately, yes. Since it is an IamGUI container, this does render every frame, or like get redrawn every frame, like the old system did. Since it is the Udon Sharp GUI though, the Udon Sharp header there's not a whole lot going on there, so you're not really incurring a performance cost for it. It's just a little bit sad that we don't have a new form of that for UI elements. So let's see here. There's a couple things that we can do, because right now we are just binding directly to this. This list view is handling everything else, and we're going to need some custom behavior on this. So we're going to have to do a couple things here. We're basically going to be taking this list view and intercepting everything that it does. Do we want to do that? Okay, so there's two things that we can do with this. We can either insert all of our stuff into the existing list view, or we can simulate the data that we have on our script here, and then whenever these values change, we just pump those values back over into our script. And while that tends to be a bit on the dirtier side, like it's a bit like you can get it done faster and stuff, it tends to be a bit more legible, even if there might be a little bit more of a writing performance cost. I don't think it's ever really been an actual matter. So we're going to start with that. I'll probably show the other method if we still have time, though. Now, what we have is a target on behavior and a string this. So since we are simulating these classes, we're in an editor script. Let's just have a fake data structure class. So let's just have a public class event target. And set that to be serializable. We'll do public on behavior target and a public string event name. So what we'll actually do here is our script can just have a list of this thing here. So let's do a private list of event target. And then just call it event targets. Now, what I can do right now is let's just pump in some fake values for this right now. New event target. Whoa. And let's just put in a second one. Whoa, but spelled right this time. All right. That way we have some generic information that's in here that we can just kind of show off to make sure it's working. So instead of doing target list.bind property, you saw earlier that one of the things in here is item source. And we could set it there, but we'll just do it outside of here for a bit more cleanliness. Target list dot item source equals event targets. Now, if we head back here into Unity, let's just make sure that it's working. All right, so there we go. You see that we have event sender element editor plus event target as our variable names. Now, these look completely useless. This is just a word. There's nothing happening here. So what we're going to do is how do we want to handle that? Would it be easier to do this or just do the serialized properties? Okay, well, I'll do this for now, and it will show you how we write that stuff, and then we'll adapt it over to the serialized properties. So we'll do target list dot make item. So whenever a new item is made for being displayed in this list, we basically need to tell it something. What is it complaining about? Return statement is missing. Okay, so we need to return a visual element whenever this happens. So we're just gonna right now return new button because it's just easy to kind of look at. Oh god. Okay, we'll just do text equals I'm a button. All right. So now, instead of seeing this title here, it will be displaying our own visual element. Or not. Let's actually get a check in here quick. There we go. So let's click into this and see if these actually are here. Scroll view. Element. All right, so there aren't any children that are using this. All right. Well, make item target list dot. All right, so make item kind of goes in tandem with bind item. I didn't think we needed to do both, but I guess yeah, let's just do that. So bind item passes two different things into a function, and that's the visual element that's a reference and the index that is in the array. So since this is just passing a visual element, we'll have to declare that it's a button because we know it's a button from here. So we'll do button equals element, and then just cast that as button. And we'll do button.text equals button exclamation point brackets, and then we'll toss in I for our index there, and then just return that button. Oh, does this not need to return? Yeah, this doesn't need to return. Okay, that's it. Button. Yeah. Sometimes it can be a little bit silly. I really thought that all we needed was the make item for putting something in. Okay, yeah, so that's working. I guess it just doesn't do anything if you don't have a bind in there. So you see now we have button 0 and 1. Reorder it. Then as I drag this one up, you see that it's still saying 1, but the moment I let go, it gets renamed because those values get rebound because they changed. Now, let's do our actual fiddling here. We're gonna do not a button, but we want a kind of displaying field for these two things. We're going to do a new, yeah, let's do visual element, event sender container equals new visual element. And this visual element needs to have, well, two things like we did over here. We need to have two property fields. Property field. God, I really can't spell today. Target field equals new property field, and then property field event name field equals new property field. So each of these, like over here, we can just pass in the serialized property that we wanted to use. But for now, let's just go ahead with our custom class. I'll swap this over to being using serialized properties in the future, but having this custom class implementation can be pretty handy if you want to make some custom editor tooling for some stuff. So let's go ahead and have this be Oh god, actually, nope, screw it. We aren't getting the custom classes. We're just doing the serialized properties because it is actually, at this point, easier. So, we aren't doing an item source, but we are doing a... Yeah, that should be fine. Okay, so after we make our target field, we're gonna have to do prop targets, and then we do array element get array element at index. There we go. Oh, right. Okay. All right, I might be bouncing around a bit here, and that's because I'm very much in the IM GUI layout right now in my head. But this section, since we are doing this list here, we make the elements here. We bind the elements here. So if we want to do anything with this stuff, we need to do it here. This is just where we create it. So instead of returning button, we're going to return our event container, and we'll do event sender container.add target field. And then down here, we'll do event sender container.add event name field. Now, all of this stuff is going to be in there, and we're going to reference that stuff here. Now, let's just assert that a property field named event name field exists in there. So we'll do element.q for query. Query gets you everything that can do that, but q just gets us the first one that appears. So we'll do property field, which is called target field, and we'll call this well, target field equals that return. And we'll swap that out for event field in the second line. And let's go ahead and do target field dot bind property. Excuse me. And we want our prop targets dot get array element at index I, because we get that I knowing which element is currently being bound to. It just comes with this function here. And copy paste that down here, but instead we'll do event name for that, and instead of prop targets we'll do prop event names. That should bind those values, but I think in order to do this we need to properly bind it as a serialized property. Target list dot bind property. I could be wrong, but I think that's what we need to do. Now, there's absolutely going to be some things that we need to fix, but I think this works. All right, well, it's a good start that it didn't work. Dang it, Unity. Oh, okay. They are both here. I think they're just being compressed. Okay, let's see if that's the issue. Event sender container dot style dot height equals 16. If I'm using a make and bind item, does this need target list dot item source equals This has been a bit since I've really fiddled with this. Let's see, I have 30 minutes to figure it out. Let's see. Unity list view example. All right. So looking at that. Documentation. This is one of the unfortunate parts of figuring out anything in Unity. There's just sometimes where you have to sit back and just look at the documentation. All right. So in this system, I've chosen selection changed, on remove, on add, list view. What is items that they're casting? Items is a new list up there. Okay. Googling documentation on the fly, decided. Yeah. Maybe we do have to use our custom stuff if we want to be using these. It's a little annoying, but yeah, I guess we can. All right. Let's just do our public class event sender again. Public string event name. Public udon behavior target. Event sender is already our script name, right? This needs to be freaking, what did I call this before? Target event. So we'll just go with that. I don't think we need to set it to be serializable right now, but that's fine. Do a private list. Just like a normal list Unity. There we go. Target event. Target events. Let's just add a few new ones here. Event name equals wool, and basically do exactly what we did before, but again, because I'm very good at this. All right, so target events is our list here of our target event, and we're going to be using this as our source for our target list here. So dot item source equals that. Now, since we're doing this, we're no longer going to be referencing our serialized properties here. So we need to do some value setting and some change callback assignment. So instead of having this be a property field, we're just going to have this be an actual object field. So we'll do object field. Yeah, let's just swap that out right there. Do a property field and swap it out up here as well. And since our name field isn't going to be a property field, it's going to be a string field, we'll just swap all of these out with text field. Yeah, text field. That's it. All right. Event name field. Why do these have two names? I wonder. Maybe that would have worked, but I just didn't set this up right. That'd be hilarious. Actually, now that I've done this, I almost wonder. Let's just check something quick. Find property, prop targets. So I think the name stuff, we might have to, instead of calling it target field there, we have to set the name to be target field. I could be wrong. But I do want to check this. Field. Alright. This might just be the name of object. It's just not binding right. If this is the case, then yeah, I'll just go ahead and swap it back. But alright. Ah, haha. Alright. Yeah, that is working. Alright. So we don't need our custom classes. Haha. I'll just comment them out in case I panic and need them later. Alright. So what was happening before is I was declaring the name of this as a variable. I was not declaring the name of this object field, like the property field and stuff, like before. Since I'm doing it, the way that you find stuff in UI elements is by doing these queue queries and passing the type that you're after and the string name. The string name has to be declared manually on the thing, and only then does it actually work. Alright, we're back in business. Now, you may notice, this looks awful. Not when you're standing still, though. If we have it just like this, where it's these three spheres, and it's like, oh, well, you have, like, the sphere showing, but where are the actual event names? Well, if I grab this to drag around, you can actually see it squished down there below, and they're all just stacked like this. And we don't want that. We don't want them stacked vertically, we want them laid out horizontally. So let's go ahead and, instead of doing this, where we're just, where is it? There we go. We're just putting them in. We're going to do, actually, if we undeclare this height here, it should expand it out naturally, I think. But again, we don't want that. Yeah, okay. So that's because we set our, yeah, okay. Alright, so now, event sender container needs to order its children horizontally instead of vertically. Unfortunately, that's pretty easy. We just do event sender container dot style, and I think this is flex direction equals flex direction dot row. There we go. And if we let that load in, there we go. Now it's laying out horizontally like this. Perfect. So this is actually, for the most part, a lot of what we needed. Now, there's a lot of things that we need to fix here. One, they're shaped weirdly. Two, if I hit plus, it panics when there's like the extra value in there. And if we hit minus, it doesn't actually clear it from the second array. Mostly because it didn't actually add it to the second array at all. So if I go back to normal and I remove our last one, so debug, you'll see that we're not actually touching the event names at all. Because basically what we're bound to is prop targets. So if we actually want to have it control our event names as well, we have to we have to intercept all of the adds and removes that we do, and basically do the same thing as we did here for the delete element and index and stuff, but through this system. So like we have the target list dot make element and target list dot bind element, we can do target list dot items added. And so this is a callback where we can do a little, there we go. All right, so ints is just a list of indexes, I guess. But it lets us know the indices that are actually being appended into. So easily enough, we can just go to prop event names dot Do we have to do insert array element at index? We might have to do that. I think get array element at index is the one that we're going to have to do. Sorry, insert array element at index. And since this is giving us a list of indices, we're going to have to for it. So for each int index. All right. Pop that in there. Bonk. So when an item is added to targets list, so when we hit the plus at the bottom, it should go through all of the new items that are added and add one correspondingly to the event names as well. Because again, we're basically doing two things at once. So let's hit plus, and it worked. Okay, so that completely copied this value. We can move it around, but you'll notice that if I rename this first one or let's go with this last one, for example. New name, whoa, there we go. You'll notice that if I drag it up here, well, it didn't actually reorder. It's still down here. And that's because we're not actually moving anything in our second array, we're just moving it in the first array. So we're going to have to do target list dot reorder order. Actually, how did this work? Shall remove at items removed. Does it not have a callback for reordering a list? I could have sworn it did. It was on remove. Let's see, target list dot on. I'll just go through the list. I'm sorry that you can't see this on the stream, but items chosen, remove, refresh, selected. Huh, do they not have a callback for when item is reordered? Huh, that's unfortunate. I could have sworn they did. Well, if they don't, then unfortunately that means that we'll have to drop support for reordering our list. We can still remove things as needed, so let's just add support for that here quickly. So instead of items added, we'll do items removed, and then remove, delete array element at index. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I really thought that Unity list views supported that. Maybe they do in Unity 6. Maybe that's what's happening. But I'm looking at the documentation here, and I'm not seeing any kind of callbacks for when the reordering is. Yeah, how strange. All right. So if I hit plus, it panics. All right, why is it doing that? Oh, right. Serialized object dot apply modified properties. All right. What do we got? What do we got? Oh, 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 oh. All right. Seems to be working. All right. But of course, if we go to an index of 0, it'll panic. Because we need that. If prop event names dot array size does not equal 0, then we do this stuff. Alright, adding and removing stuff works perfectly fine. Again, we're going to have to drop the reordering feature for now. That's something that we could re-implement if we were using our custom class up here. But for now, yeah, I'm just going to remove that feature for the time being. So let's go up to reorder mode and get rid of that. It was just commented out for now. Reorderable, false. All right. So back in Unity, you'll see that we now can't reorder the list anymore. Well, once it actually takes me, there we go. So we don't have our dragging options over here, but we can highlight a selection and click on it and we can remove it. Now, there's a few things we need to change with this system. One, you'll notice our field over here just says none object. It doesn't know that it needs a udon behavior. So what we can do there is we can go to our object field here and do target field.object type equals type of udon behavior. And honestly, that should probably do it. You can realistically put any Unity object into an object field that isn't declared. But you see now it says none udon behavior. So I can drag our sphere into here. I can drag the second one and the third one. And toggle object. Now, the sizing of these things auto-expanding out to the minimum size of the text isn't really what we're looking to have. So let's have these automatically expand horizontally. So that's going to be the style of both of these. So we'll do target field dot style dot flex grow equals 1. And that 1 is basically just the max value of should this grow to full size. So let's go see how this looks. All right, so this mostly looks good. But you'll see that it's pushing our object toggles, our toggle object event names off the right side of the screen. And it doesn't matter how much we stretch it out, it just expands and continues to do that. So we're going to need to, instead of declaring flex grow like that, which is just kind of like the safe, easy way to do it, we're going to have to add in a little bit more tinkering to it. Actually, so I'm realizing now that this is where we're binding it. This should be up here, and this should be up here as well. Just keep the creation and the data binding separate. So flex grow. I'm actually curious. If I just set this flex grow to be true, does that negate our need to set it on all of the child ones? Because I think it will. That might actually be. Oh nope, no it doesn't. All right. So we're not going to use flex grow anymore. What we're actually going to use is width, and width is something that we have to declare as a percentage for this because we want it to be 50-50. So I'm going to do width equals style length dot style length dot oh, how do you get a percentage one of these? Length percent. Length percent, and then you pass a float into that. Okay. Alright, it's a little... There's a little bit to it. Let's do that for this as well. There's a good chance that this 50% will go off the side of the screen for this, and that's because we're in a smaller box. Or it might handle that perfectly fine. Let's find out. Yep, okay, that goes off the right side a bit. So instead of doing 50, let's just knock this down to 45, and that should accommodate for the fact that it's expanding out inside of a much smaller thing. All right, well, 45 was obviously much smaller than we needed it to be, so let's do 49 and see if that handles it. When you're using UI elements, there's a lot of back and forth with just figuring out what numbers are the right ones for you. Okay, yeah, that seems to work. It seems to be exactly the numbers we were after. Yeah, okay. So now we can still do this. I'm not sure why it just let me look at the debug for this. 7.5. Okay. So these weren't in sync when we started. So if I set this to be 0 and we go over to normal. Yeah, okay. So that will break if they're not in sync. But it shouldn't ever get out of sync if these are declaring on top of it. Okay. Yeah, that should be fine. Alright. Right into these values here. Toggle object. Put in all of that. And game. Just verify that's working. Good, why thank you. I'm very happy that this is actually coming along here. UI elements is something I love and hate. It works most of the time, and then suddenly there's a lot of Googling. Alright, this all seems to be working. Excuse me. Phew! Alright, well, while we didn't have time to set up our custom class up here, we did get through the event sender editor through IMGUI with using the editor GUI layout methods, and we set it up through the UI elements system, where we build all of our objects individually, maybe with a few more options and settings than we did over here. I mean, in fact, this editor, even with a bunch of space, is 92 lines long, whereas this one, admittedly, also with a bit of space, is 135. Now, you could drop that by... yeah. It's a little bit more typing. It's a little bit more to get right. This one has notable copy-paste that could be optimized a bit, like these deletes and stuff, or anywhere that these apply are shown. But yeah, I think, relatively speaking, I think that should be it. Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about what we did today? And possibly any suggestions on where to take this for Thursday? Because I want to do more editor scripting stuff. And there's a lot of things that I could do with this, but I think maybe scriptable objects might be a good thing to jump into next time. Scriptable objects are basically a container object in Unity for storing a bunch of stuff, and they're very nice. Unfortunately, there's some workarounds that you have to do to get them to work with VR chat, and we'll go over that Thursday. But yeah, thanks everyone for hanging out. I'm glad that we kind of got through everything here. Wasn't yeah, honestly, it worked pretty well. No stream issues. There's just a a little bit of me re-remembering how list views work. Yeah, thanks everyone for hanging out. This is actually largely the reason I dove into this was because I had a question in the Discord server asking kind of a general idea of how to set to these kind of things up. What's the UI builder for? Well, so instead of manually making a list view like this, like in code, what you can do instead is, let's go into UI builder. You can find a list view, pop it here, and set all of your settings over here. So reorderable, that, do show remove, animated. Let's do all, show border, and header here. Yeah, so this is where you can really put in some styling. When you're done with this, what you can do is Control S to save, and this will save as an asset that will go, let's just put it in my inspector. I am not on. There we go. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, in here you have a bunch of options here on the right where you can click and enable all these. And that's what I just went through here, where you can enable it like that. And when you're done with that, you save that as a file, and that will just get saved as a UXML file, which can be used in a lot of places. But if you're using it in code, what you'll do here at the start of Create Inspector GUI, yeah, it should be visible. Yeah, what you should do in code here is you can do resources, there we go, dot load, and do that in order to grab your My Inspector file here. You'll have to put it in a resources file folder, but you can do that. You can grab it, a visual tree asset, and just name it something in here. Bar. Well, I knew this tutorial last month when I was trying to learn this. Eventually figured it out when reading documentation, but it was a headache. Yeah, it is. There's a lot to learn, especially if you're doing it on your own. It is a bit of a mess. But last quick thing here with the UXML files. Since UI Builder can save this as a thing, we can take that file, we can load it through resources.load, grab it with the tag visual tree asset for the variable type. And what you do next is, I always call this UXML. You do UXML.clone tree, and then you pass in the visual element that you want to pump it into. So we would move it right below UXML. We'd move it right below root, and we can paste that in here, and we'll clone the entire tree that we built right in there. So if I call this, yeah, I just call this My Inspector. Gonna watch the VOD after you're done? Yeah. Thanks for showing up. I'm just finishing up here. We have 1 minute left. I started like a minute or two late, so I'll just finish this up. But if you see, we're looking here. Since we cloned it in, we have our header here, and everything's just appended after that. So you can do a bunch of stuff with this, like let's put a background image in, for example. Background, texture. Yeah, let's just grab some random nonsense. There. Scale to fit. There we go. Was that not working? Why is it not working? Maybe I have to set a height. Size, height, 40. There we go. Yep. So it was just automatically squishing. So yeah, you can use this to really easily add styling, add pictures and stuff. And maybe I'll play around with that a bit on Thursday as well, because scriptable objects are great, but probably won't take 2 hours to go through everything for it. So we'll do some styling on that as well. But yeah, hope that's been enlightening for everyone. Now that I think about it, I think it will probably make more sense for me to have these assets on Patreon after Thursday, when we've like finished this whole thing. I was going to put them on after this, but if we have a bunch of stuff that's going to change, I think it will make most sense if I put it on after that. Let me know in the Discord server if you want them now. I can do that as well, but I'll probably have it up on after the Thursday stream. But yeah, today's stream was actually largely because of a question that I got about this in my Discord server. Someone by the name of Breaker Love had a big question about how a lot. Was it Breaker Love? No. It was. I'm looking at the wrong one. It was Z Skulls. That was it. They had a question about how I did my editors and stuff for some of my tools. So yeah. If you want to see something on a stream, ask in my Discord server. Join my Discord server. I am shilling my Discord server. It is in the description of this stream. Everyone, have a good day. We'll see you on Thursday. Bye-bye.